Hello, today I'm going to talk about the game Sorcerer from SPI from 1975. An imaginative world of fantasy. Time is the third cycle, first stage of magic. So obviously it's a fantasy game, but it kind of plays like a war game. It's a bookshelf game. I think it also comes in like a flat tray version. It's by Game and Graphic Design by Redmond A. Simonson, who also did many other innovative games as well, and then development by Tom Walsick. Cover is nice. I wonder if my box might be a little bit faded over time. Unique art that conveys sorcerers and their various legions, fortress of some sort, dragons. You kind of get a sense of the fantasy theme. There's nothing on the back. There's a little more theme on the side here. The color of magic is not always black. Indeed, in the third cycle of the first stage of magic, color is power, and power belongs to those who can manipulate the color's magical properties. Color them sorcerers, using color to conquer and rule a magical world of inevitable military conflicts between rival sorcerers, where the spectrum of events is painted in wildly fantastic hues, as you'll see. Sorcerer, a game for 2 to 6 players, can be played solitaire as well. It's played on a map depicting part of this imaginary world. It's moderate, plays 3 hours, and it's moderate suitability for solitaire play. They actually have some solitaire scenarios. First half page is dedicated to S'more theme. Ordinary men settled in the region they called Banarkima, such areas of that land that they're free of the colors. Whenever an alien universe intruded, it signaled its presence with an aura of characteristically colored light. In these zones of color lay dangers that all but the most brave or foolish did not care to face. The towns of men grew up in the enclaves of the Grey Lands. Travel between towns was hazardous and therefore infrequent. But of those who did so journey, an exceptional few became wise in the use of the powers of the colors. Such men were called sorcerers. First of all, black and white rulebook. As typical of SPI, it's got pretty detailed rules, 16 pages. We'll look at that in detail. SPI dice. This version doesn't come with a tray. Like I said, there's also a flat tray version, which the tray is the box. But in this one, there's plenty of space in the box for a tray, and this is just a GMT tray I used. So, for a number of counters. Many unique counters. They're all standard 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Most are, they're two-sided. Kind of typical for the time. So the character counters generally have a combat strength and a movement allowance, and then a description character, and then there's also color indicators on them. So the unit types, so they talk about magical, non-magical. Sorcerers are actually non-magical units because they're humans that learned how to do magic. The magical units are like dragons and demonic elements, that sort of thing. Just kind of keep that straightforward. So first of all, the non-magical units. There's 1 color sorcerers, and the colors are green, red, blue, orange, yellow, purple, and then some elements are also white, and there's some black ones as well. But the 1 color sorcerers, there's 3 each of the 6 colors. And so this is the full side, and then this is like the degraded side, where the combat strength and movement allowance in some cases decreases after it's been damaged. 2 color sorcerers, there's 1 each of 15 combinations. I've shown a few here. 3 color sorcerers, 1 each of 20 combinations. Showing a few here. The white sorcerer, black sorcerer, human infantry, 6 sets of 7, and one set of 4. So there's a non-magical, and then the magical are air dragons. 6 sets of 9, and one set of 2, because there's white ones as well. Demonic infantry, 6 sets of 8, one set of 2. Trolls, 6 sets of the 6 colors, one set of white, which is 2. Enchanted fortresses, 7 6 of 1s, 6 sets, 1 each of with 8s and 4s, 6 sets of 3, 2, and for 12, 37. Again, of the different colors. And then there's game markers, there's vortices, color conversion markers, different colors in the white, attrition markers, different colors, pin markers, game turn phase. So here's the map. It's 22 by 34, and the version I have, it's a thick paperish map that folds out. It's part of the imaginary magical world on which the unit counters are maneuvered. A hexagon grid is superimposed on the map sheet. Each hexagon on the map sheet is one of 8 different colors or shades. The exact relationship between color and the hex and the color of the unit, the hex, is important throughout the play of the game. So on here as well, so you'll see, here's different towns, like a river, for instance. And there are some terrain effects, so you do see some different terrain features, but it's mainly color and, very colorful and impressively so, I'd say. There's a phase record, game turn record, the sorcerer combat results table, and again, colors are important for that. The color value chart, and then there's the die roll and combat result chart here. Some more player aids are in the back of the rulebook. There's the movement point cost schedules for sorcerer units, for sorcerers using optional rules, movement point cost schedule for human infantry, movement point cost schedule for magical units. Going through the rules here, game scale, each hexagon measures scale 10 kilometers in diameter. Each game turn represents 2 days, and sequence of play. A. First player movement in Conjuration phase. The first player may move all, some, or none of his units in a sequence he desires within the limits. A friendly sorcerer unit may expend movement points to conjure new units and vortices, return depleted units to full strength, and attack enemy units through the use of magic bolts. In the giant attrition phase, attrition segment, both players' magical units that are not in the same hex with friendly sorcerers undergo attrition. Vortex movement segment. The first player rolls the die to randomly move all vortices on the map, placing and moving new vortices. Both players apply the results of vortex results. Joint combat phase, both players may simultaneously attack enemy units in the hexes occupied by friendly units. Both players apply the results of combat at the end of the phase, after all attacks. Second player movement in Conjuration, and multiplayer, this would apply to other players as well. Joint attrition phase, joint combat phase, game turn interphase, advancing the game turn marker, and the game turn sequence of play variants. In games involving 3 or more players, sequence of play may vary from game turn to game turn. At the end of each game turn, the player was the last to move its units. Whilst the die determine the sequence in which players move. For the die roll to the color value chart, the player who controls the color indicated by the die roll becomes the first player. Revolve around the wheel in clockwise fashion. Colors of magic. Each has 6 types of magic represented by color. Each hex, a certain color denotes an area where that variety of magic is most effective. There are also white, which is a combination of all 6 colors, and gray non-magical hexes. The effectiveness of a color depends on the color it is being used against. To determine the exact combat strength of a unit, it is necessary to use the color value chart. Color value chart has three separate and distinct functions. It is used to determine the movement point cost for a magical unit to leave a given hex without a sorcerer, used in the first hex which the unit is exiting. It's used to determine the color augmentation added to the magical unit's combat strength. It's used to determine the probability of attrition for magical units. To determine the color value movement point cost for a magical unit to leave a hex without a sorcerer, color of the hex that the unit is in. The number shown is the color value movement point cost. Players should note that the color value cost is paid only when a unit is not moving with the same color sorcerer, and only for the first such unaccompanied exiting from a hex. Subsequent hexes exited without sorcerer cost 1 movement point. To determine the color augmentation to be added to the total combat strength of a stack containing a magical unit, the number given in the box and color augmentation to be added. Note that the color augmentation is added only to the total combat strength of all friendly units in the hex. When by themselves, human infantry units never receive color augmentation, nor do sorcerers. To determine the probability of attrition for a magical unit, find the color of the unit in question shown with the color of the hex that the unit is in. If the die roll for that unit is lower than or equal to the number indicated in the chart, the unit suffers attrition. Note that units which undergo attrition have a 100% chance of attrition in a white hex, or hex of their own color, but that, except for white hexes, units undergo attrition only if the color of the hex they are in is chosen during the joint attrition phase. Movement. So there are magical units, human infantry, and sorcerer units. Sorcerer units are magical, it's a learned magic. During the movement and conjuration phase, the phasing player may move as many or as few units as he desires. There are two types of movement, regular and teleportation. Only sorcerers may use teleportation, although they may be used to pick up and transport human infantry units. Units pay a cost of 1 or more movement points from their movement allowance to leave a hex. There is never any cost to enter a hex. Regular movement. Magical units leaving hex independently and accompanied by a same color sorcerer must pay the color value cost to exit the first such independently exited hex in that phase. Other hexes are exited at the basic cost of 1 movement point per hex. This cost may be increased by terrain and the presence of enemy units in the hex. The movement point cost is to leave a hex is the number given for that color in the color hex of the color value chart. Human units, sorcerers, and magical units picked up by sorcerers expend 1 movement point to leave a hex, regardless of the color value cost. This cost may be increased by terrain and the presence of enemy units. Movement by teleportation. Sorcerer units expend 1 movement point to teleport. Move from one hex of their color that is not occupied by enemy units to any other hex of their color, regardless of distance and intervening terrain. 2 additional movement points must be expended by sorcerer when teleporting from any enemy occupied hex. Human infantry units may be picked up and transported by teleportation movement by any friendly sorcerer at the cost of sorcerer to sorcerer of 5 movement points and a cost of transporting unit of 1 movement point. Units may combine both regular and teleportation movement. Units may not teleport into a hex occupied by enemy units, nor into or out of a white or gray hex. Units may teleport out of enemy occupied hexes, with all units doing so paying 2 additional movement points for leaving the enemy hex. Magical units may not use teleportation. Pin units may not move until they are unpinned by a friendly sorcerer. Must be the same color for magical units. Movement restrictions and prohibitions. Unused movement points may not be accumulated or transferred. Unit may not end a movement in conjuration phase in violation of the stacking limits. However, units may freely enter or move through hexes containing other friendly units regardless of stacking restrictions. Unit may leave an enemy occupied hex at the cost of 2 additional movement points. There is no additional movement point cost to enter an enemy occupied hex. Opposing units may occupy the same hex at the end of any movement phase. Units may enter and leave enemy occupied hexes in the same phase. There is no additional cost to enter or leave a hex containing vortex. However, units entering a hex containing vortex are immediately attacked by it. There then continue their movement. Units do not have a zone of control. Units influence only the hexes that they physically occupy. Conjuration. During the movement and conjuration phase, sorcerers may expend movement points to perform a variety of magical tasks. These include conjuring new magical units, restoring depleted units to full strength, removing pin markers, creating vortices, attacking enemy units with magic bolts, and converting white hexes to a certain color. All conjuration, except in the case of magic bolts and white hex conversion, occurs with a sorcerer in front of the affected unit of the same color, secular in the same hex. Conjuration may be performed at any time during the movement and conjuration phase. Types of conjuration listed occur between sorcerers in front of the units of the same color and the same hex as the sorcerer. Creating magical units. A magical unit may only be created in a hex in which 1 is of the same color as the sorcerer and the unit being created, or a white hex, and 2, not occupied by any other magical unit except a fortress, nor occupied by any enemy unit. Moreover, a sorcerer may only create magical units of any of its colors. Magical units must be created individually. The cost of movement points to the sorcerer to create a given unit is equal to the unit's combat strength. Newly created units may move in the movement phase in which they are created, while units may only be created in white hexes. White units may only be created in white hexes. Depletion. Units may be depleted either through attrition or as a result of combat. To restore a unit to full combat strength, a sorcerer must expend the appropriate number of movement points while stacked with the unit. This may be done in any hex not occupied by an enemy unit. If the unit expended any movement points before it was returned to full strength, it is considered to have its depleted movement allowance for the entire phase. If the unit did not expend any movement points before it was returned to full strength, it is considered to have its full strength movement allowance for the entire phase. Pin markers. Units would suffer a pin combat result if a pin marker placed on them. The pin marker may be removed by a sorcerer expending movement points while stacked with the unit. Removal of pin marker may occur in any hex. In order for a pin marker to be removed from a magical unit, the sorcerer used must be the same color. Magic bolts. During the movement and conjuration phase, sorcerers may fling a magic bolt at an enemy occupied hex, which is of the sorcerer's color, or a color over which the sorcerer's dominance, the best relationship in the combat results table. There is no range limitation for bolts, nor does terrain or distance they are flung through affect strength. There's no limitation to the flung effect strength. There's no limit to the number of magic bolts which may be flung at a given hex during a movement and conjuration phase. So if a unit would attack at the best indication on the column, it said to have dominance. Bolts may only be flung by a sorcerer in a white hex or a hex's color. Bolts may not be flung at hexes occupied by friendly units, nor at gray or white hexes, nor hexes of a color over which the sorcerer does not have dominance or power. The color of the bolt must be the color of the hex from which it was flung, except in a white hex. Bolts cost a sorcerer 5 movement points. Each, a single undepleted sorcerer may fling as many as 3 bolts per movement phase. Bolts from the same sorcerer resolved individually. Bolts from different sorcerers directed at the same hex are cumulative if the bolts are the same color. The bolt attacks are resolved separately if they are of different colors. All bolt attacks are resolved during the friendly movement conjuration phase. The basic combat strength of a magic bolt is equivalent to the sorcerer's combat strength. The bolt benefits from the appropriate color augmentation. Vortices. Vortices are magical storms of chaos which may be created by sorcerers which move randomly on the map. Vortices may be created by a sorcerer through the expenditure of 5 movement points in the hex of the sorcerer's color. The vortex is immediately placed in the hex. It does not attack the sorcerer who created it in the phase. Vortices may not be created in the white or gray hexes, nor in hexes containing enemy units. Movement vortices. At the end of each generation phase, the player who has the most recently moved rolls the die. to determine the direction of movement. Whenever a vortex passes through a white hex not already occupied by a vortex, another vortex created. Vortex which enters hex already containing a vortex counter is considered destroyed. There may never be more than one single vortex in a hex. Vortices which end their movement in white hex do not create an additional more vortex in that hex. Vortices which are directed to exit the map, pass through a mountain hex site, are destroyed. Whenever a vortex enters gray hex, is destroyed. The movement of vortices move sequentially, and the exact sequence in which they move is determined by the player's movement phase it is. Whenever a vortex enters a white or color hex, reduces any human infantry unit in that hex by one step, completely eliminates all magical units, and reduces any one color sorcerer by one step. One color sorcerers in a hex of their own color are not affected by vortices. 2 and 3 color sorcerers and the units with them are never affected by vortices. Giant fortresses and the units in them are never affected by vortices. Units in gray hexes are also not affected by vortices. Upon entering a hex containing a vortex, must immediately go the effects of the vortex. A 2 or 3 color sorcerer may destroy a vortex by entering a hex containing a vortex and expending 5 movement points for that purpose. 1 color sorcerer may do so only in a hex of his own color. Hex conversion, white hex conversion. Full strength sorcerer must begin his movement and conjuration phase in a white hex in order to convert it to one of its colors. All 15 of the sorcerer's movement points must be expended in this conversion effort. White hex may only be converted once. A white hex converted by a 2 or 3 color sorcerer may be converted to any of the sorcerer's colors at the owning player's option. Color hex conversion for white sorcerers only. A white sorcerer may convert a color hex to a white hex by expending all 15 of its movement points in a hex. Only white and other color hexes may be converted. Gray hexes may not be converted. No enemy unit may be in a hex undergoing conversion. Additional friendly units may be in that hex. The presence of a vortex in a city or hex has no effect on conversion. Stacking. More than one friendly unit may end the movement and conjuration phase in the same hex. The limits of how many may be stacked. Friendly units may be stacked at the same hex depend on the color and type of units. Enemy units in the same hex do not affect the stacking limits of friendly units. No more than 2 friendly units total of the following types may end their movement in the same hex. Air dragons, demonic infantry, trolls, and human infantry. These 2 units may be combinations of the preceding types. Color compatibility. If 2 of the friendly units in the same hex are magical units, they must be the same color. Differently colored friendly magic units may never be the same hex. There is no limit to the number of friendly sorcery units that may be in the same hex. The color or colors of sorcerer powers does not affect their ability to stack with each other and with friendly non-sorcerer units. During the combat phase, however, only one of the sorcerers in a hex, owner's choice, consists of combat friendly units. The non-participating sorcerers do not contribute any of their abilities or strength, but are liable to suffer losses which other friendly units cannot account for. There may be only one fortress in a given hex. Stacking limits and color compatibility apply only at the end of the movement and conjuration phase. Then attrition. Magical units which begin a joint attrition phase, not stacked with a friendly sorcerer, may have to undergo attrition. Begin the game, place the attrition marker of each color, excluding white or gray, and a cup to join attrition phase. For each player turn, the player will last move, picks 2 counters, random, magical units. These 2 colors of hexes must undergo attrition. Magical units on other color hexes do not. Units in white hexes always undergo attrition, regardless of the colors picked. All players roll the dice separately for each of their units, which may suffer attrition. Units which suffer attrition immediately loses 1 step. If full strength, the units become depleted. You flip to the other side for the depleted strength. If it's already depleted, it's eliminated and removed. To determine the probability of attrition, consult the color value chart. The die roll for units less than or equal to the number given for that color. Unit in that color hex, the unit suffers attrition. Sorcerers, human infantry, enchanted fortresses, and garrison units never suffer attrition. A single magical unit stacked with a friendly full-strength sorcerer of the same color does not suffer attrition. If there are 2 magical units in a stack, or if the sorcerer is depleted or not of the same color, then they do suffer attrition. Using gray hexes do not suffer attrition. Friendly magical units in the same hex are considered to be 1 unit when rolling for attrition. If they do suffer attrition, both the units are affected and they both lose a single step. Sorcerers. Sorcerer is a human who has become skilled at type or types of magic. So sorcerer isn't a magic being itself, but they just do magic. There are 5 basic types of sorcerers. These are 1 color, controls only one of the colors of the magic. 2 color, controls 2 colors. Might be 15 possible combination of 2 of the 6 colors. 3 color, controls 3 of the colors. There are any of 23 color combination of 6 colors. White controls all the colors of magic, including white. Black controls no represented magical color, but rather acts as an intelligent vortex. The black sorcerer is never affected by vortices. Sorcerers of 2 or more colors has equal power for each of the colors it controls. In other words, the green, red is the same as both the green and the red. Effects on combat. Sorcerer may only use his full printed combat strength when stacked with friendly magical non-sorcerer units, which match one of the sorcerer's colors. No more than 1 sorcerer may add combat strength to the given stack of friendly units. The combat strength added to the stack may never exceed the total combat strength of the other friendly units in the hex. When alone in hex, the sorcerer's combat strength is reduced to half the printed value. Note that this does not affect the power of the sorcerer's magic bolt. When a gray hex, the sorcerer's value is reduced to half the printed value. When stacked with only human units, a sorcerer's strength is reduced to 1/2 the printed value. The amount of strength the sorcerer may contribute to such a stack is either equal to the combat strength of human units, or 1/2 the sorcerer's printed combat strength, whichever is less. The only situation in which a stack gets benefit of color augmentation is when the stack contains a magical unit or units. A stack contains a sorcerer. Simply because a stack contains a sorcerer, this does not mean that a stack will benefit from color augmentation. The sorcerer is not a magical unit. If a stack contains a friendly magical unit of a color in which a sorcerer does not have power, the sorcerer's effective value is halved. But the stack nevertheless experiences the benefit of color augmentation based on the color of the magical unit. A given sorcerer in a given hex can never suffer more than 1 step down loss in a given phase. Performance of Conjuration and magical tasks. Sorcerer's combat strength has no effect on the ability to perform magical tasks. Attrition and Insulation. Full strength sorcerer in a single same color magical unit stacked with him never undergo attrition. If there are 2 magical units of the same hex and or sorcerer is depleted, then the magic units are vulnerable to attrition. Sorcerers may undeplete friendly units during the movement and conjuration phase. Sorcerers themselves may be undepleted only through the expenditure of their own movement points. When sorcerers become undepleted, this act occurs at the end of the movement and conjuration phase. Combat. Combat is simultaneous and may occur between opposing units which occupy the same hex during the joint combat phase. Units may also be attacked during the movement and conjuration phase under certain conditions. All players may resolve potential combat situations by attacking. Combat occurs between opposing forces which occupy the same hex during the joint combat phase and is simultaneous. The player who is attacking when each combat is resolved is considered to be the attacker and the opponent is the defender. A player's opinion to attack is completely voluntary. Combat is resolved by calculating difference in strength between 2 opposing forces in the same hex, rolling a die and cross-indexing the die number and combat differential in the combat results table. Steps in resolving combat. Determine the total combat strength of each of the opposing forces given combat situation. If there are 1 or more magical units present in either or both forces, add the proper color augmentation for the color in that unit in that color hex. Subtract the adjusted combat strength of the defending force from the attacking force. If 1 or both the forces involved consists wholly of non-magical units, sorcerers and or human infantry within the combat differential, the neutral line of the combat results table. This will be the column of results which will be used to resolve the attack. If both of the forces involved contain one or more magical units, dragons, demonic infantry, trolls, and giant fortresses, one of the other 5 horizontal lines of the combat differentials must be used to determine which one. Cross-index the color of the magical units in the attacking force with that of the magical units in the defending force. Find the combat differential in the appropriate line. This will be the column of results which will be used to resolve the attack. Roll the die, cross-index the die number with the appropriate combat differential, read the result. After both opposing forces have made their attacks, apply the results to the units involved. Which units may attack? Only friendly units which occupy the same hex as enemy units may participate in attack against enemy units. No units may attack more than once per joint combat phase. There may be no more than one attack per player per contested hex per joint combat phase. If any friendly units are involved in combat in hex, all friendly units in that hex must participate in the combat. Units may not be selectively held from combat. Multiplayer combat. In games involving 3 or more players, following rules apply. In a joint combat phase, the player's units may attack opposing units of only one specific color in a given hex. All units of that color must be attacked. Units in a hex which are not involved are ignored for purposes of the combat. In a joint combat phase, the player's units may be attacked by no more than one player, and all combat results are cumulative. Combat is still considered to be simultaneous, and results are not applied until the end of the phase. Different players may never combine for purposes of combat, either as attacker or defender. Sorcerer Fortress unit may be reduced 1 step only during the phase. If in any joint combat phase the unit is eliminated as a result of several players, victory points awarded are divided equally among the players involved. In order to gain any credit for the elimination of the unit, a player's units must have achieved a combat result of at least 1 on the unit. Terrain effects upon combat. Rivers, mountains, and cities have no effect upon combat. Note that when a depleted magical unit either begins or ends the joint combat phase in a gray hex, is automatically destroyed and removed at the time, regardless of the presence of veteran sorcerers. Full strength magical units have a combat strength of only 1 point when in gray hexes. Then the combat results table. Dot indicates no effect. Pinned, place a pin marker on the affected units. Pinned units may not move or attack until the pin marker is removed by a friendly sorcerer. Proper color. Defensive combat strength of pinned units is not affected. When a force suffers a pinned result, the entire force is affected. Number result. Number indicates the number of steps defending units must lose. Loss taking priority. When a force which consists of more than one type of unit suffers loss in combat, losses must be suffered by the various types according to the strict priority. 1. If there are any magical units forced, they must be entirely eliminated before any balance of losses inflicted upon 2. Any human infantry units in force, which units must be entirely eliminated before any of the balance of loss can be inflicted upon an enchanted fortress. If their loss still be taken, then lastly the participating sorcerer in the force must suffer a 1-step loss. If there are any losses yet to be taken, they are not applied. Enchanted fortresses and garrisons. Enchanted fortress units are mobile magical units. Fortresses may not be conjured. Instead, they are assigned to each player at the start of the scenario. Once played on the map, they may not be moved. Fortresses may only be placed in a hex of their color, and there may be no more than one fortress in hex. Properties of fortresses. Fortresses do not count for stacking purposes. Fortresses may only be reduced 1 step during any phase. The combat strength of fortresses is treated exactly the same way as combat strength of other magical units. Fortresses defend the same manner as other magical units and do receive color augmentation. Fortress may add its strength to an attack only if there is a same color source stacked with a fortress. If no same color source is present, the fortress may not participate in the attack. Fortresses and the units in them, in garrison, never suffer attrition, nor are they affected by vortices. The presence of a friendly fortress in hex does not interfere with the conjuration of new magical units. Garrisons. Demonic infantry units may be placed as garrisons inside friendly, same color enchanted fortresses. To accomplish this, the same color sorcerer must spend 15 movement points in the hex containing both the magical unit and fortress. Units on garrison should be placed under the fortress counter to signify this effect. These garrison units nevertheless count against the stacking limits. No more than one demonic infantry unit may be placed on garrison within a given fortress. Units on garrison never suffer attrition. They are not affected by vortices. Friendly magical units in the same hex as fortress, but non-garrison do suffer attrition and are vulnerable to vortices. Magical units placed on garrison may not leave the hex unless assisted by a friendly same color sorcerer. Human infantry units are always considered to be garrisoning a friendly fortress in the hex. They may freely enter and leave the fortress. Then victory conditions. General victory in most scenarios is determined by the accumulation of victory points, which are awarded with fulfillment of 3 basic conditions. These are conversion of hexes to a color controlled by a player, control of human and non-magical magical cities, and elimination of enemy fortresses and enemy human infantry. Procedure: at the end of the indicated number of game turns, the game is over, and the victorious player is determined. These victory points are total to determine the overall victory. So victory condition points. For each white hex converted to a color controlled by player, 5. For each color hex converted to white hex, white forces only 5. For each enemy fortress eliminated, 15. For each enemy human infantry eliminated, 3. For each gray city hex controlled, 3. For each white city hex controlled, 5. Explanation of the victory point schedule. Formerly white magical cities are considered controlled by the player who controls the converted color hex they are in. These points are in addition to the points received for conversion. Human cities are considered controlled by the player who has a human infantry in the hex at the end of the game. 2 or more players have human infantry in the hex. The player with a strong human force in the hex is considered to control it. If equal forces are present, then the city is contested and no player is considered to control it. If the sorcerer designated as the prime sorcerer by the player is eliminated, that player automatically loses the game, regardless of victory point totals. Then introduction to scenarios and how to set up for gameplay. General procedure. Once players have agreed on the scenario, chosen sides, begin the following manner. After playing all the units in the scenario, all indicated fortress must be deployed in a hex of their color. This hex must be 3 hexes inclusive from any map edge, unless otherwise indicated. Garrisons may be placed in the fortress if indicated. Sorcerers must deploy in a friendly fortress of the same color. Human infantry units may deploy either in a friendly fortress or in a friendly city hex. Fortresses may not be deployed within 3 hexes of an enemy fortress. First player deploys his units first, then second player, etc. And prime sorcerer designation. At the start of the game, each player must select one of his sorcerers as his prime sorcerer. This unit represents the player himself. All friendly units are immediately removed from the game at the end of the phase in which the prime sorcerer was eliminated. The unit selected as prime sorcerer must have a full strength combat strength greater than or equal to other friendly sorcerers. The identity of all prime sorcerers must be revealed at the start of the game. A record of their names should be kept. Variation from general procedure. In certain scenarios, the players will be given more specific setup directions, different victory conditions, rules modification, etc. And then scenarios. 1 player scenario, the education of Perindian. A few cycles after capturing the city of Hanyan, Perindian, the first sorcerer grew restless. He resolved to tour the other cities of his kind to broaden his mind, and suddenly to see what he could get in the way of tribute. Another 1 player scenario, and it's nice that it has specific solitaire scenarios. It's hard to find that in games. The Magic Tide. In the 5th cycle of his rule, Perindian and his apprentice Foal saw humankind as they knew it, threatened by the massed hordes of the other realms. Waves of air dragons swept across the face of Rodican. Hordes of demonic infantry followed in their wake. Their aim was simple: destroy every human, city and soldier, kill every flower of human sorcery. Then 2-player scenarios. I'll be doing a 2-player scenario. I'll actually be doing the rivalry of Bolt and Deny, and I'll also be doing a black sorcerer with that to act as a vortex. So I'll do that optional rule as well, which I'll talk about. So in the rivalry of 2-player scenario, the rivalry of Bolt and Deny, in 37th cycle of the first age, Deny grew fearful of the growing power and popularity of Bolt. And I'll talk about that in detail instead of in play. And then we saw Bolt's son challenges old Deny. In the 45th cycle of the first stage, Bolt disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Usa, who had suppressed his foreign powers, immediately accused Deny of murder before the convocation of the city lords. Another 2-player scenario. The uprising of the city-states. In the 56th cycle of the first stage, Poem proclaimed direct rule over the cities of Dema and Rodoblis. None who have objected had not found so rigorously and repressively implemented his usurpation of the city lord's authority. He doubled taxes, he erected statues of himself in every square, and generally made a nuisance of himself. Another 2-player scenario. It's nice that it has all these different scenarios, of course. Gives you a real flavor of the game. War for dominance. At the dawn of the Second Age, the fragile structure of agreements and unstated compacts that kept the growing sorcerer community relatively at peace broke down over the incident of the Red Glove. The Red Glove had been fabricated by artisan Bonforal for an unknown sorcerer client. Supposedly it would have allowed a non-red sorcerer to conjure in red magic. And then multiplayer scenarios. The Broken Triumvirate. After the War for Dominance, a somewhat stable period during which a triumvirate, unanimously called themselves the Three, reigned. The Greylands were divided amongst them. The White Realms allowed to revert. Another multiplayer scenario. The task of these Stones of Power. When Usa grew wise in years, and not too red in the head, foresaw his own death, the runes told him it would be connected somehow with cooking meat. He resolved to pass along his powers to one of his 3 sons, ere he depart, and some upstart 2-power sorcerer, usurp one of the colors of his time. Since he loved all of his sons equally, he set them a task to decide who would be his prime beneficiary. Then the Fane of Kenfane and the Pride of Insa and Perrin, 10th cycle of the Third Age, the city lords of Dema, Verena, and the Riddle of Bess appealed to the newly created League of Sorcerers for relief from the depredations of Fane, the White Sorcerer. So many interesting and diverse scenarios there. Then there's some optional rules. The Cloak of Invisibility. At the start of the game, or at the start of any owning player movement Conjuration phase, a sorcerer may make himself some units invisible. Casting the Cloak of Invisibility. Units may be made invisible at any time during the owner player's movement and Conjuration phase. The cloak can only be created by a sorcerer. For each unit placed in the cloak, the sorcerer must spend 3 movement points. The sorcerer must be in text of the unit. Note that the sorcerer must spend 3 movement points in order to make himself invisible, although it's not required, and that the sorcerer may be invisible. It's not required that the sorcerer be invisible to cast a cloak around other units. Units may be placed in the cloak only in the hexes of the sorcerer's color, or white hexes. Magical units and the cloak must be of the sorcerer's color. Maintain the Cloak of Invisibility. He must expend 1 movement point for every unit in the cloak, including himself. Additionally, the sorcerer must pay double any of the normal movement points usually imposed while maintaining a cloak. Units remain under a cloak only so long as their second sorcerer is calling the cloak. The sorcerer can voluntarily allow a unit to appear during his movement phases or during a joint combat phase. The invisible units can only be effective to combat if they are allowed to reappear. They do not suffer the results of combat if they remain invisible. They do suffer normal effects of vortices and attritions. Task limitations on invisible units. While invisible, Sorcerer cannot convert white hexes. They may fling magic bolts. Sorcerers may conjure units while invisible, but those units are only conjured invisibly if the initial 3 movement points is added to their base conjuration cost. Visible units cannot control cities. Invisible units do count against the total only player stacking limitations. Starting the game in invisible state. One Sorcerer player can start the game with Cloak already created and units stacked with him under a cloak. And then Sure, the Black Sorcerer of Gorm. The Black Sorcerer Sure, just may of Gorm's liaison with a female demon. Sure, may perform any actions that any multicolored sorcerer can at the same movement point cost, except conjuring magical units and converting hexes. Sure's most powerful feature is the ability to act as an intelligent vortex. The Black player, Sure, seeks to create confusion and disunity amongst color sorcerers. Sure wins a scenario if he can prevent any other player from winning. He also wins if he can destroy the winning sorcerer in the game turn in which he has fulfilled victory conditions. Sure always moves last in a sequence of play. Sure affects all hexes he passes through as if he were a vortex. His option. He does not, of course, act as a vortex in gray hexes, although he may safely enter them. Sure automatically creates a regular vortex. Whenever he enters a white hex, he may choose not to do so. Sure does not have to expend any movement points to create a vortex in white hex. Sure may also destroy vortices at any additional cost, simply by passing through them or entering their hex. Sure himself is never affected by vortices. Just as do other sorcerers, Sure may fling magic bolts. He may fling magic bolts to and from gray hexes only, using the neutral differential line. Sure may teleport to and from gray hexes. Sure may engage in combat in any hex using the neutral line. He uses face value. Combat strength in gray hexes. He attacks and defends at half face value in all other hexes. Whenever an opposing player's human infantry is destroyed in combat, Sure may resurrect that unit. He does this in gray hexes as if he were a conjuring unit and without strength. Such undead human infantry automatically die again at the end of any joint combat phase, which they are not stacked with Sure. And then clones. Any multicolored sorcerer may at the beginning of any of his movement phases split himself into his magical clones, an individual one-colored sorcerer of each of his colors. By expending all 15 of his movement points, these one-colored sorcerers are used exactly as any one-colored sorcerer. They may be recombined into the multicolored sorcerer in any subsequent winning player's movement phase. The multicolored sorcerer must be in a hex of one of its power colors. This hex must be free of enemy units. The multicolored sorcerer must be at full strength and pinned. This is where cloning can be performed. The winning player simply replaces the multicolored sorcerer with one-colored sorcerers. The active cloning is considered to have spent all the sorcerer's clone's movement points for that phase. Record the names of the one-colored sorcerers so that the proper clones are brought together when if the multicolored sorcerer is reconstructed. In order for a cloned multicolored sorcerer to be killed and thereby permanently removed from the game, all of his component clones must be eliminated. As long as one of his clones remains, the original multicolored sorcerer can be reconstructed. All multicolored sorcerers are reconstructed from their clones. All the surviving clones must begin the owning player's movement and conjuration phase in the same hex, which must be their white hex or hex of the proper color of one of the clones. The hex must be free of enemy units. All the clones must be unimpeded and unpinned. If all the original clones are present, each spends its entire movement allowance. Then the movement conjuration phase, the clones are removed. The original multicolored sorcerer is put in place. If all the clones have not survived, the surviving clones must spend additional owning player's movement and conjuration phase reconstructing themselves for each missing clone. Hiding and assassination. Human infantry may hide in gray hexes and make a surprise attack against an enemy sorcerer that enters the hex. The surprise attack is made at the end of the enemy movement conjuration phase. Only one human infantry unit per gray hex per player may be hidden. Players may start the game with up to half their human infantry units hidden. They may hide more units during the game by bringing the unit to the city under Sorcerer's Cloak of Invisibility and then hiding the infantry unit. Revealing the unit. Hidden unit can be revealed at the beginning of any owner's play movement conjuration phase or during any enemy player's movement conjuration phase in which an enemy sorcerer enters that hex. Hidden unit may also be revealed at the beginning of any joint combat phase in which there are enemy units in the hex. Making a surprise attack. If an enemy sorcerer enters gray hex containing the hidden unit, the player owning the hidden unit announces a surprise attack. The human infantry unit attacks at double its current combat strength. The attack is resolved normally, with the exception that the sorcerer takes losses first before any friendly units that may be accompanying him. The human infantry unit may not be attacked during the movement conjuration phase. Alternatively, the human infantry unit may make the surprise attack only during the joint combat phase, but to be treated as such must be assisted by friendly non-hidden units. Hidden units do not control cities while hidden, nor do they impede the egress of enemy units from those cities while hidden. They may only make surprise attacks against a force-contained enemy sorcerer. They do not count against owning players attacking stack limits in the hex. Opposing units may be hidden in the same hex. If one player makes a surprise attack against such hex, the other player has the option to reveal his unit, cancel the doubling effect of the attacking human infantry. Then there's Magic Flux. At the end of every game turn, a designated player picks one attrition marker. All hexes which are the same color as the attrition marker are treated as gray hexes in the next game turn. When a color goes gray for this game turn, no new magical units of the color may be conjured during the game turn. No magical bolts may be flung at that color. No hexes may be converted to that color, and all conversion markers in that color disappear permanently. Then you can also discover new spells. Players may invent new magical tasks and abilities for sorcerers units and introduce them into play. The players must agree on the limits of the new spell and the costs involved. Only Prime Sorcerer can be involved in developing the new spell. Players are limited only by their own imaginations and the common sense perceptions as to what the new spell will do to the fabric of the game. The spell is developed by attempting to use it 3 times, once per game turn. Each time the spell is tried, the sorcerer undergoes an attack. The first time he uses it, the attack is read as the best line, second good, and third neutral. Differential usage depending on the order of the spell. First, relative -1, second -2, etc. Developing spells, sorcerers can lose more than one step per phase, which means that sorcerer would be killed by a 2 result when attempting the spell, or by the combination of 1 result in development and 1 more in the enemy action. Spells are developed in the phases in which they are used. And then they have suggested spells like counter invisibility, clairvoyance, spells of confusion, time travel, spells of immortality, ubiquity, control, foretelling the future. It's nice to give the option of creating them, but it would have been kind of nice if they were included in the game, I guess. Creating scenarios, and it gives you options to create scenarios using victory points and the standard deployment rules. Players can easily generate an almost endless number of scenarios. And then there's player notes that talk about the logic of how it's developed and some player guides. And the design credits: game design, physical systems and graphics, Redmond A. Simonson; game development and design assistance, Tom Walczyk. Apologize if I pronounce it incorrectly. Graphic production team. So setup, I'll be doing the 2-player scenario, the rivalry of Bolt and Deny. And I'll be doing this with the option of a 3rd player who will be the Black Sorcerer. In the 37th cycle of the first stage, Deny grew fearful of the growing power and popularity of Bolt. He's out to humiliate or eliminate Bolt by the conversion of the Wide Realms, thus throwing his enemy into a confrontation in which Deny assumed he would be able to shatter Bolt's power base and shower as much glory as possible on the wonderful and awesome Deny. He almost succeeded. Starting pieces. So first player Deny, 1 green, orange, purple sorcerer Here. Deny. 1 orange sorcerer. 3 human infantry. 1 orange 8 fortress. And all deployed within 3 hexes of Sissa, which is here. So I have them deployed around here. Second player Bolt. 1 blue yellow sorcerer here. 1 blue sorcerer. 1 yellow sorcerer. 5 human infantry. 1 yellow 4 fortress. Deployment within 3 hexes of Avadar, which is here. And then I have the black sorcerer up here in Red Love Bess. That'll be a function is basically a intelligent vortex. Victory conditions inscribed in the rules. Judged at the end of 8 game turns. Special rules. Only the multicolored sorcerers may use teleportation. So as you get into play here, remember what the board's set up. So you get the phase record track, game turn record, sorcerer combat results table, color value chart, and then here's the playing area. And we'll focus in on where the action is. First getting into the order of play for yellow. For orange, 3. And for black sorcerer, 2. So we'll go in that order. It goes first. Player 1, movement and conjuration. So the movement point costs are shown here. First of all, I'll move some of the infantry. So just going across plain terrain, it's 1 movement. They'll mainly kind of set up a defensive area here. Then the sorcerers, then do some conjuration. The multicolored one can do teleportation, but since they're defensive, they're not going to be jumping out there right now. So first of all, blue. So before he conjures, he's going to maintain 10 conjuration points to call up some magical items. First, so he has 5 points he can move across plane here. So 1, 2, 3. Get into his light colored hex there. He'll conjure an air dragon and a troll, and they can move as well. He's going to have the trolls. He's going to have the air dragon stay with him for right now, but the troll will move. 1, 2, and then 3. He didn't cross the mountain hex side, so he didn't have to. If he would have crossed straight across, it would have been 1 plus 2 or 3, but he's just going to move right there, so he's fine. So that's his. And then the yellow he's going to conjure 2 trolls, which take 7 each, 14, and he can't, in 1 hex he can't get to the same color, so he's just going to conjure them right there. Then the multicolored primary sorcerer, he's going to conjure an air dragon and a troll, which would take 10 conjuration points. So he's going to move up a bit. So that costs 2 points. Then he conjures an air dragon and a troll. And again, they can both move. The troll will move. He's got 3, so he'll go 1, 2, and he'll stay there. That's the first drain attrition phase. Put the attrition markers in a container, shake them up, and then randomly draw 2. So I drew blue and orange. And right now, only the yellow player who also has blue magical units, since he's a yellow-blue sorcerer, has magical units. The others don't. So it only applies, blues are the only one, and it only applies to ones that aren't with their sorcerer. The air dragons are with their sorcerer, the trolls aren't, and they're blue and blue. And from the color chart, blue and blue is 6, and same colors with the same hexes are 6. So if you roll that or less, there's attrition. So for that case, there's automatically attrition. So they lose 1 step, which is unfortunate for blue. And then we'll do, and there's no vortices to move, so we go to the orange movement and conjuration phase. So when orange goes, and he's going to think about what he's going to do here. So for the sorcerers, if they do a magic bolt, it costs 5 points, but they only can do it against magic items that are in hex of the same color as them, or when they have dominance. And the dominance is shown here. Here's the color of the attacking unit, and best is when they have dominance. So for instance, if they're shooting from orange, they'd have dominance over pink, or if they're green, they have over yellow. And the yellow blue group here doesn't have any yellow there alone, so they're not going to do that. So we'll focus on moving and conjuring. First of all, the orange one will conjure an air dragon and a troll, which would be 10, so he'll move up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he'll conjure the air dragon and troll. And they're going to stick together now, and for the stacking limits you can have 2 in there with the sorcerer, and they don't want to expose them to losses during the attrition, so they're going to stick together. And then, so the multicolored ones can teleport, and you can teleport with an infantry for a total of 5. So you'll go 1, 2, 3. The infantry will move 1 of his points, and then it'll take 5 more for the sorcerer, so the sorcerer will be up to 8. He wants to come up. He's going to be pretty aggressive and come right up here. So he's got a total of 8 points there. He can't do any bolts though. But he can do another conjuring. So he'll conjure a troll, which will stay there with him. And these infantry can move. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Then we do the joint attrition again. We randomly take. So green and red, and there's no unaccompanied units of those. There's no attrition. So now the black sorcerer is going. He's going to create some vortices. So he'll be going 1, 2, create a vortex. 3, 4, another vortex. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then he's going to move back to gray. 9, 10, 11. And it's unclear when you do the black sorcerer if you do the attrition, so I won't do that. I'll move on to the next game turn. So we'll do a bit of the second turn here. So movement and conjuring phase. First of all, we'll move this dragon up here. He's got plenty of movement points to get up here in this hex. Card sorcerer. will teleport, then go in that hex. And I'll bring an infantry with him, so the infantry will go 1. They'll go 5 together. So we've still got some conjuring points left, enough to conjure another troll, which he'll conjure here. And the troll can move, so he'll be going in here. Join this battle. Infantry will stay here, and the wizard will go in here as well. So a lot going on there. Then we'll move these up. This dragon will move up. Enough movement to get up there. We'll advance these trolls. So these 2 sorcerers here then. The thing about magic bolts, blue does have dominance over green, and there's green units here. But there's too much going on there, and there's friendly units, so he's not going to do that. Instead, he's going to move up and conjure a couple. So 1, 2, 3. And then he'll conjure an air dragon. A troll. So yellow sorcerer is thinking about doing a magic bolt at orange, because yellow has dominance over orange. So look at it and go with combat strength, and then you get the color augmentation bonus for the bolt. So that would be, the augmentation is 6 since it's yellow on yellow. So that's a total of 8. When you look at the orange though, you have the combat strength, sorcerer 2, and then 5, 12. And then the augmentation, since there's a magical unit there, is 6. So that gives a total of 18. So it'd be a minus 10, which is, off the chart. So it doesn't make sense. So he's going to conjure a couple things instead. He's going to conjure a troll and a demonic infantry, because they could move up, but they're not going to, because they don't want a chance of being reduced by attrition. So first of all, looking at this battle between the air dragon and this unfortunate human infantry. So the attack is 3 and 2. There's the dragon gets a color augmentation though, and the infantry doesn't. And the augmentation is 6. So it's 9 to 2. So plus 7 on the neutral line for the dragon attack. Neutral line. So again, for the dragon, 3 plus 6 is 9, and then 2 for the human infantry. So 9 versus 2, which is plus 7 for the dragon. You go on the neutral line here. Plus 7. Roll a dice. 5 is 4 units lost, so of course the infantry will be lost. Then we'll look at what it's simultaneous, so the infantry would be at minus 7, which is off the charts here, so he doesn't do any damage and he's eliminated. Then we'll look at this this big battle going on down here. So look at this battle here, there's a lot going on. It kind of grouped them there. So there's a lot to think about actually, because you got magical units and some non-magical. So basically first you look at, since there's some magical on each side, they get the color augmentation. For the orange on green, you look up here, orange on green is +2, you count that. For down here, you have both blue and yellow on green. And I just used the best one, so it would be a 5 since that's blue on green, so you get +5. Then you have your attack values. So for the green, orange, blue, it's 6 + 7 + 2, which is added to the +2 for 17. For the blue, yellow, it's 4 + 3 + 7 + 5 for a total of 21, including the color augmentation. And then you also need to look, since there's a magic item on each one, you have to then look at here to see which of these columns you go on. And again, I took the most favorable one. So orange to blue is inferior, and yellow to orange here is best. So that affects which columns you go on here. And then simultaneous, do rounds. First I'll do these guys. So they're at -4 on the inferior, should be here. So they basically can't hit anything. And then blue yellow is +4 on best, so it's looking good for them. Best column is up here, 4. The 4 points damage are taken in order of precedence. First of all, the magical units hit 1 point and then depleted and then taken off. Human infantry depleted, and the second hit is taken off. So it's the 4 hits, and now all that's remaining is the sorcerer. So it's kind of snowballing there, as you'll see. So the only lost the troll, lost human infantry, and then since there's not a magical unit there anymore, they've also lost that color augmentation. So they're down to 6 there. And now also too, since there's one of them doesn't have magical items, and again sorcerers aren't magical items, then you go to the neutral line for the combat instead of looking at the best inferior columns, etc. rows, etc. So not only is the sorcerer reduced down to its own combat value, but when it's alone in a hex, it's also reduced by half. So now it's down to 3. So now looking like good odds. It's 3 to 21 or -18. And it's on the neutral, which is obviously off the chart, so they can't hit anything. The others are +18 on the neutral line, off the charts too. But they can only reduce the sorcerer by one step in a phase. So that's where we'll leave it for there. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of how to play the game. So that's Sorcerer from SPI from 1975. A lot going on there. Very unique game. It's a fantasy game, but it's basically a war game in a kind of a fantasy world. A lot of different components. A very unique game in that you have various magical and non-magical elements. You're in different spots of like magic basically across the board, and what type of magic you're best at compared to where you are in the world. It very much affects things. It's kind of very strategic that way. There's some randomness involved, of course, as well as the combat differential. It's a lot to think about individual combat, but that also makes it good for figuring out strategies and everything too. Definitely would recommend it since it's so unique. Takes a bit to get your head around. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Thanks a lot.